Well, hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining our International Women's Day panel. Really excited to see you all here today and to have Mia Jafari and Anne Roberts with us as well. So very quickly, for those who haven't heard of Aerospace Xelerated before, we are a funded 3-month accelerator for software startups that can move the aerospace industry forward. And we're really looking to engage with businesses that are looking to scale up and raise further investment. At the moment, we're working with AI and autonomy startups, but historically we've also worked with Industry 4.0, energy and sustainability. So a lot of different categories and companies, but mostly early stage. And very, very excited to have Anne Roberts here today from Aber. Aber is one of Aerospace Accelerated portfolio companies, and also Mia Jafari from Intellect Hub. Before we kick off and talk about the theme for International Women's Day, which this year is Break the Bias, I just want to quickly introduce Anne and Mia. So just to kick off with Anne, she is the co-founder and CEO of Aber. Anne is an experienced medtech professional entrepreneur. Throughout her career, she has worked with many international teams using her specialist knowledge and application of new technologies for a range of pre-hospital care settings where an ambulance just can't reach. This includes supporting crew support in the air and onboard marine vessels. Anne has international academic publications in emergency response and voluntary first aid, and has honorary research status at the University of Aberdeen. She is currently the CEO of Aber, a Scottish company developing new solutions to support onboard medical emergencies. And I'm certain that Anne will share a little bit more about Aber and what they're working on throughout this presentation. And also Mia Jafari, who's the programs manager at Intellect Hub based in Dubai. Mia manages the Intellect Hub and programs and the plethora of events and activities that Intellect runs, and designs and leads workshops in creative thinking, resilience, and lean design. Mia is passionate about creativity, human-centered design, art of hosting, and building strategic partnerships that bring about the future of business forward. Mia believes entrepreneurship is at the heart of economic growth, and collaboration between corporates and startups creates a culture of innovation that is critical for building a sustainable future. And I'm sure that Mia will also talk a little bit about Intellect Hub and the programs that they run. To kick off, and it would be great to hear about your journey into aviation and aerospace. I know you're working with medtech, but obviously aviation is an industry that you're strongly aligned with. So it'd just be great to hear about your journey, kind of what you were doing before and what you do now.
Sure, Sonia, thank you for inviting me along today. It's actually a really nice subject to talk about, and one that we've been sort of growing in our small company over the past year or so. So I'm Anne Roberts, CEO of Aber. Aber is a company that focuses on providing medical support in the aviation and maritime industry. But essentially, we were a university spin out, so we came from a completely different context, which was university life, and that gender equality makeup is quite different to what I experience in aviation. We're around 5 years old now, actively in the aviation market and maritime, and we provide onboard technology that supports any passenger that gets sick on a long or short to medium haul flight, and we help to communicate that information to medics on the ground, which will then allow for them to make decisions about diversion and best support and care whilst they're in the air. And so that's a short introduction about myself, but feel free to take any questions.
Thanks so much, Anne. And Mia, could you tell us a little bit about Intellect Hub, and then kind of your journey into the sector as well?
Of course, thank you so much, and thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here. So Intellect Hub launched 6 years ago, originally as an incubator, and then we had an accelerator and an idea lab. So originally, we literally had one program, which was an incubator, focused on supporting early stage startups in aviation, travel and tourism. But actually, we became a lot bigger very organically over the years, and we had new partners join us from Microsoft, Accenture, now Amadeus. And we really became the go-to platform for startups who want to work with our partners in the Middle East or scale their aviation, travel and tourism solutions in the Middle East. So yeah, it just grew from being one program 6 years ago to now being a hub and lots of events. And when we first started, we were actually looking at supporting startups in the region, but it actually very organically and very naturally, international startups came to us and really wanted to collaborate. So we added our accelerators to the offerings that we give. And my journey into Intellect is just so unexpected that no one can believe it. It's like he studied design and art and had a design business. But at the same time, I was helping entrepreneurs. I was an entrepreneur, so I was running entrepreneurship programs. And it just happened that, I realized that I had a lot of soft skills from having a business and, doing the work that I was doing in the creative sector, which easily transferred into managing programs. So it was completely unexpected. I never imagined that I'd be working in aviation, travel and tourism, really ever. But I think, somehow it led me to be here, and I'm really grateful.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing your journey, Mia. And I think that, as you say, you kind of made a career transition from the arts and design world into aviation aerospace. It just proves that you don't need to have a tech or an engineering degree to be part of this industry. So really love that. And thank you so much for sharing. I think I just want to briefly touch on and introduce this Break the Bias theme for this year, for 2022. So we know that, whether deliberate or unconscious, bias makes it difficult for women to move ahead. We know that just understanding that bias exists isn't really enough, and then we need to take concrete action to level the playing field. So today, in this event, this panel, we really want to explore, how can we call it gender bias, discrimination, and stereotyping in the tech industry, aerospace and aviation, and how can we build an inclusive, innovative ecosystem moving forward? So with that context and the Break the Bias theme, I'd love to ask you, Mia, and you, Anne, what does Break the Bias mean to you?
Yeah, I don't mind starting. So I think, for me, bias isn't just, gender, that it's male, female. It's really about inclusivity all around. So your nationality, your race, your educational background, if you have any disabilities. And I think breaking the bias is, automatically, naturally, as human beings, will gravitate to people who are similar to us. And I think that's very natural. So I think, we always have biases, those who may be similar to us. And I think sometimes, that can be a good thing, but often it cannot be a good thing. And I think in my career, what I've realized is, I have a completely different background from all the startups, that I manage, or the people I work with, but actually it's a benefit because it creates more diversity. So I think, and a different way of thinking and a different way of problem solving. And I think, when we talk about break the bias, I feel like we need to break the bias of our own stereotypes of how people are. And it has to be on just gender, it's about nationality, race, everything, it's disabilities. And I think that's what break the bias means to me. Thank you.
Absolutely, Mia. Very, very good points. Anne, you want to go next?
Yeah, I agree with what Mia's saying, and I echo those comments. But we were talking, everyone kind of knows in business that we do have this two elements of bias, the conscious and the unconscious. And I think as a female leader in aviation, which is had a history of a male-dominated industry, and originally, it's how we actually approach that as a leader and as a manager to actually break that biasness down. One of the things that we do quite well, or starting to do at least in aviation, is look at STEM and break the bias from the very early stage of young people, and not just for women but for men as well, and promoting equality and making sure that girls and boys have good access to science and engineering, and that it's not wrong to be part of a science and engineering degree. I've seen that more positively in aviation now. In life science, with my other hat on, which is medical technology, we've actually broken down that bias a bit quicker. In academia, there was a bit more of a gender balance. But for me, it's the conscious bias that we have to focus on to make continuous change in action as leaders. So the elements that making sure everyone knows to call out when the bias is not right, when there's not gender equality or where there's something going wrong, and empowering all your team or your staff or people around you to do that. So I actually think we're kind of, when it comes to unconscious bias, we're maybe making steps with that, but sometimes with conscious bias, we don't know how to manage it. We don't know how to react. It tends to get washed under the carpet, and there's not so many positive ways we can actually ingrain that into the workplace. So, I mean, we've done some tips and had some tips along the way about how we do that from the very beginning of our company. Being a startup, we don't have somebody in the team that we can, a person that's designated fully for equality and inclusion, etc. As we're young, and we have just enough to cover our operations and our technical team at the moment. But certainly that doesn't mean to say that we haven't really addressed bias within the business and gender equality within the business. That's really, really important to us. Actually being on the Boeing program ourselves last year as a accelerator participant, really we had quite a few sessions there where we talked about gender inequality, and that's really helped us over the last year to actually plan out what our own steps will be within our business.
Amazing, thank you, Anne. No, I agree that there have been a lot of great steps taken forward in aviation and aerospace. You can see, organizations like the ADS Group, Boeing as a company, us at Aerospace Xelerated recently launched our mentorship program. These small steps, and they're steps nonetheless. So we're just trying to make a start and build that foundation and then build on that. But as you were kind of saying about your learnings from maybe some of the culture and hiring sessions we ran with you in cohort 2 last year, how have you, as a CEO, as a business leader, what are the kind of things or activities or initiatives that you want to implement and embed within Aber moving forward? Kind of, have you thought about that? Is there anything concrete that you can share with us?
Well, we're consciously, we're looking at gender bias as we grow. I mean, at the moment we're a small team, so gender equality is quite kind of even in the team at the moment. But I think as a leader, and especially as a CEO in aviation, I mean, in aviation specifically, around about 3% of CEOs are women, and I'm quite conscious of that. One of the changes that we made is, we're not feared of gender equality. As we started off as a young company, we have 2 founders in our team, and Senya, you maybe remember this from me talking to you previously, but initially our CEO was our male founder, and I was a co-founder. But our CEO is a scientist by background, and his best place was in the science of the company and the operations of the company, and not in the CEO element. And in the very early stage of our business, we had the bravery to and actual trust between us to go, okay, we need to swap roles for the benefit of the business. With the support of our board. So, gender, although this wasn't particularly about gender equality, so to speak, it was about who's the best person to take that role forward, and having a recognition and equality around us. And from that early stage, we then realized that being on the same level was actually a really important value in our company. And that's a value that we promote now, through our website and through our interaction with clients. And when we hired our chairman is also male, and the day that we were PRing that information, we were talking to the photographer about how important it is for all of us to be on the same level as we start off. And the photographer took a picture of us. I'm 5'3", 5'4" at most. My chairman is 6'2" or 3", I would say. And the photographer took a picture of us standing at different distances so that we all looked the same height. And we talked about the importance of actually being on the same level and the same starting place, and actively promoting that in a business. And you have to actively promote and make sure it's okay for your staff to know about diversity, to actually speak out about it and be consciously promoting it within your organization, whether you're big or small. Some companies promote quality or credibility or accountability as their core value, but actually within our company, then equality and diversity is a core value for us, and that will probably remain that way. But the other key thing that we're doing is, as we're hiring this year, we're hiring quite a lot of more staff. As we're hiring, we're very conscious to make sure that we have that diversity at a senior management level, and not just at a lower level in the company, because actually in this day and age it's attractive attractive work, and sometimes more difficult for senior management. There's still a bit of a split there in terms of male female in the senior management teams across many aviation industries. So we're trying to do that from the very outset.
Absolutely, and especially for, I think, new hires and the younger folks, it's essential, when they're looking to enter a new job or career. That kind of diversity piece is going to be key to attract really, really bright and brilliant people.
And age is really important in there, Celia. I mean, we do quite a lot to support young people in science and STEM, etc. But actually, we have to look at what is equality for this generation. And one of the key things is around senior management and female leaders, who are maybe have been in their career for 20 or 30 years. I've been really pleased to see during lockdown and also since then that things like support for people, senior management or management teams that are going through menopause, and they're of that age. Menopause can really disrupt women's lives. It can cause lack of sleep, it can cause brain fog, etc. And that can really impact the workforce. And never used to have anything like that to support female colleagues or female leaders of a certain age, and it's refreshing to see that coming through now. I mean, we don't have that implemented in our company at the moment, but we're certainly looking at it to make sure that we're addressing equality at all ages as well as gender.
Absolutely, and that you're thinking about it now is so important. That's amazing. And yeah, just to go back to your point around skill sets and how you said, like it's best if I'm CEO and then you move into COO position. That's important, to leverage your skills and find out where your strengths are, and that's what it's all about. So absolutely. And Mia, just quickly to touch on kind of Intellect Hub and your team and your company, is there anything that you yourself personally are doing within the business or maybe outside of Intellect Hub to advance gender equality?
Thank you so much. So I keep picking off, but I'm here. So I think we do really try and encourage. All of the team at Intellect is female. So and it didn't actually happen for specific reasons. It just happened that there's 4 women who are part of the Intellect Aviation Hub team. We didn't deliberately seek it, but I think it was just about the skill sets. And actually, Dubai is really incredible because people often imagine the Middle East and Dubai, there's all this kind of gender equality, inequality, but actually there's so much the government is doing from a very kind of high up level to encourage women into leadership positions, and really the aspirations of you can do anything you want to do. I mean, the vision of Dubai is huge, and the aspiration that people have is you can do or you can be anything they want to be, and there are no limits. And I think that's why I think from my experience of actually working in Dubai, as opposed to in London or other places that I've worked in Europe, I don't see that issue as much, and it's really surprising. But I think it's because from a leadership point of view, from the government point of view, there's this aspiration that everyone gets. You can be or do whatever you want to do, regardless of your gender. And I think that comes down because I've seen so many amazing women in senior roles, and in Intellect we're all women. So I don't know how that happened. I think the challenge that we do, I think something we really try to focus on is getting more women-led startups to apply and actually get through the program. We just generally have 1 in 3 of our applications are led by female founders. We've done a lot of work on this. Is it something we're doing? Is it it's marketing, it's the kind of the ecosystem projects that we're doing. What is it that's like stopping female founders from applying? But you know, it's a challenge that we're continuing. Each call we try and work on. But when we do find, and I think it's a lot to do with representation. So visually, we try and represent more female mentors. We encourage more women. We try and understand what are the challenges that female founders have, and often it's, I feel that just naturally a personality that a woman has is a little bit less naturally, I don't judge, a little bit less on that pushy side. And I think sometimes in the industry that we end up having a lot of the male founders being very pushy, very persistent, and I naturally see the women are not as pushy as the men. So I don't know whether that's just my interpretation. So I think, we try and, in particular, like in sessions before the program, just kind of look at how do we bring more women in from different, but also people from different backgrounds, because there's a lot to be said for that. And also with age, really encouraging more mature founders to apply. I think we live in a culture where we're really encouraging the youth to kind of be whatever they want to be, but we're kind of saying after 30, you're past it. So I think ageism is something that I sense more and more these days, is that we're kind of focusing all our narrative on the youth, and we're forgetting anyone that's over 35. So I think we're really trying to encourage more mature stage founders to be part of our program, because they bring so much depth and knowledge in, and really encouraging that as well as the gender balance.
Thanks, Mia. And I guess on the female founder piece, maybe to ask Anne, as a female founder, in Scotland, or in your experience in medtech previously, what kind of bias have you personally experienced, and how did you overcome that?
So I know that's a difficult question. I mean, it's really it's tricky to answer in so much that there are a lot of females out there that want to be involved in startups and want to take those startups forward, but naturally, unfortunately, through some processes or through some elements, in the university, a lot of the spin-outs tend to be male-led, unfortunately. We're trying to change that from an academic perspective. I do think it's much harder for female CEOs to raise money, and that's one thing that really needs to change and be challenged. I mean, from my perspective, I'm not that as young in my career. I'm in my 40s, and that probably is a benefit when I'm, if I pitched, etc. I'm going to have a CV of 20 years behind me, but sometimes young females are often put in a different pot, and sometimes actually the lead, just because you're a CEO doesn't necessarily mean that you are the most experienced or the most recognized in the team. Sometimes it's the scientist, and that scientist could be a female as well, and equal recognition there for actually the product that you're selling is based on their brain and not just the commercial element of it. But I do think that more needs to be, we are doing a lot to change female leadership in startups. There's a lot of support out there, but sometimes I do think, unless you're not confident as a leader, a female leader, you sometimes get drowned a little bit. I've gone to investor conferences where I would say that I am the minority in the room, and the majority are male founders, male leaders in that business. We are doing more to change it. I guess industries recognizing it, training programs, like the Boeing program, identifying teams that have good structures, and also, investors looking at teams. If you're investing in a team that's all male, you have to ask yourself the question of, how good is that for business these days? Having a diverse team is attractive. It's attractive for business in general now. We've moved on from that generation, but it's still a challenge. I'm seeing it change. I've seen companies come out of the universities over the last year or two where I am seeing more female leaders and those leaders being successful. But when I started off with my company, we were one of very few companies that spun out of the university at that time. and there were very few female CEOs. So hopefully that's going in the right direction. They also need the right support though. I mean, it is very difficult if you're a young CEO, you maybe have young children, and you maybe have to juggle that with life and work at the same time, and that's difficult. And I think that age category at that point, kind of more men would take the full-time roles and positions. But hopefully that's changing for the better. Certainly hope it will do.
Absolutely. And it's interesting to hear how it starts all the way from kind of university academia. So definitely some problems to address quite early on. And Mia, just I guess to follow on from what Anne was saying, from your, you're a program manager at Intellect Hub, what do you feel that needs to fundamentally change in the startup ecosystem or with investment from your point of view, not just in the Middle East where you're based, but as you say, you have a global program. So around the world, like what is the one thing that you would like to see change personally?
Thank you so much. So I think I would say if I was thinking about what is the biggest bias I face, and I would say my own limiting beliefs and what I can achieve. And I think that's just across what is bias. And I think a lot of what I have sensed is that, we limit ourselves with the limiting beliefs, and sometimes that's very unconscious. So I think when I think about my own experiences, when I was wanting to go to a certain university at the age of 16, one of my tutors said, well, you can't go there because it's very difficult to apply to that, and I stopped me from going. So I think what we need to do, and I would maybe echo Elizabeth Ann's comments, like really work from early, like from before we, even from school to university, and really encourage people to really believe in themselves beyond the biases and beyond like stereotypes of what you can achieve. And I think the aerospace industry doesn't just need, like, of course, need scientists and people from tech background, but it also needs people who have the soft skills, like courageous thinkers, they've got good leadership skills. And I think we just need to encourage that way of openness to think that, you can achieve things. And I think a lot of what I have sensed is the limiting beliefs comes from us. And I think that needs to be worked on very early on. And I guess, again, it's having really good role models for women to really have something to kind of model against. And I think that's what I would like to see more kind of strong female role models, where they really share not just how amazing life is now, but the challenges they face to get there, to show that it is possible. And I think on a very also on a very practical point of view, I do think women seem to, from my experience, it's a bit harder for them to find investment. I don't know why. And again, I think it's maybe because men are a bit more persistent, pushy. They take rejection really well. I don't know, that's what I've sometimes sensed. And whereas women are much more cautious and they're more contemplative. And I think I've seen a lot of male founders who have an idea and then they kind of go and push it and sell it 100 times, and then somehow one investor takes it. Whereas I think women are a bit more, I can take that rejection personally. But I think also where women and more diversity is needed is because we don't need the same solution over and over again. And something that I see is that we see the same product sold over and over again. And I think women think a bit more consciously about products and generally, and creating things that have more sustainable impact. And I think that's what we need. But I think there needs to be a bit more narrative around it, and around how do you raise investment for your startup, but also really having that belief in yourself that you can achieve what you want to achieve, and there isn't a linear path. And it can be that like me, that I studied design and art and now I manage an aviation hub. Like there is doesn't mean that what you studied will take you to the next career path, and I think we just need more conversations around that.
Absolutely. And you said something around, really important, something around role models. So you, Mia, personally, have you had, and probably more than one, but what are some of the role models you've had throughout your career?
Interesting question. I think for me personally, I maybe more look at kind of high level role models. So I like people, or women in particular, women who face a lot of challenges and rose above it, or and really openly share those challenges and have a new perspective on life. So not necessarily just in the industry, but I for example, I was thinking I really like Lisa Nichols, who is like a motivational coach, and she had a lot of discrimination growing up as a Black African woman who was heavily overweight, came from a very kind of poor background in the US. She faced a lot of discrimination in her career and her personal life. She kind of rose through the ashes to kind of like become a motivational speaker and help many people. And I find that really inspiring as a role model. And so I think that's kind of, I would say, my main female role model. And I find, women who had some challenges in their lives and they've managed to overcome it and use it as a tool to kind of transform themselves and help other people. I find that very inspiring.
Thank you, Mia.
Thank
And
you.
what about you?
Good question. When I look at role models, I've maybe got two based on, my background crosses over between science and medicine and also in aviation. And in science and medicine in Scotland, I really rate somebody called Deborah O'Neill, who has a young, she's got a company in Scotland, a life science company, and her success there, but not just, why I like her so much is not just about her success in business as a female leader, but also she's done a lot in the area that she lives in to encourage the ecosystem of young life science companies. She's involved in the hubs and also about getting other companies and startups involved and also encouraging the industry that the area she lives in is primarily in the oil industry area, and she encourages people to come from different sectors into her sector, cross use of skills. And I really admire that, because I do think that, whatever background me as a prime example of that, having an arts background and now in aviation, I really think that skills are transferable and usable in different ways. But from an aviation perspective, I focus on medicine, aviation health, and I really admired somebody called Tammy Jo Schultz, who many people in the industry will probably know her for flight 1380 Southwest flight, where a piece of the aircraft engine came off and the aircraft was damaged. It pierced the window of the flight and sucked a passenger out, and was a fatal incident. So her experience there and her calmness and the way that she managed that incident was actually quite phenomenal. However, that's not quite how I admire her. I actually admire her because as a young person in aviation, she was actually bending boundaries before she even had an incident which she became more acknowledged for. And that was as a young person, she tried to get into the Air Force. She was knocked back as a young female. It wasn't very common. She then went into the US Navy, and she was a test pilot for numerous events in the US Navy. I think she was a training instructor in relation to that as well. So Tammy was actually pushing boundaries well before there was an event which put her on a pillar in aviation, and she was showing young people that you just have to keep going. If one door closes for you, it doesn't mean to say that you're going to be knocked back from the industry. You have to just keep knocking on those doors and keep showing that you're worthy to be doing it. So I really admire her, and quite humbly, she spoke about the incident that day, and actually she wasn't meant to be flying that aircraft. It was actually humbly meant to be her husband. So very admirable and very long-standing career in aviation. I believe she's retired now, but I admire her consistency and resilience across every period of her career. She's actually written a book. I would encourage people to read it if you haven't already.
That's very inspirational. No, I've never heard of Tammy, but I will definitely look into this after. That sounds great. Thank you, Anne. I have one more question before we dive into the Q&A, but I know we've talked about female founders, women in aerospace and aviation. For either, really, what would be your biggest piece of advice for the early stages of the career? What is something that maybe you've learned that you wish you had known earlier on? Anne?
For me in my career, Senya, it's been about mentorship. I mean, I've surrounded myself with really excellent mentors and people on my board that can really support me, and definitely, you know, in this industry, in aviation, I would surround yourself with female leaders where you can, and learn from them, because they will tell you how they've experienced, you know, diversity, equality, and they will also tell you how they've managed to overcome it as a leader, or maybe a business leader in other ways. So, but having said that, I mean, you know, I have fantastic male mentors as well as female, but I do think if you're early in your career and you're in an industry which is more heavily dominated, then it's really good to learn from those mentors. On the Boeing program, there were several female executives that when I listened to their speeches, or you know, their training sessions, I was like, wow, you know, they've really excelled in that area. So I think surrounding yourself with good support, people that are able to support you in your career, and people that are able to help you in an industry which is maybe more male dominated, and taking the advice and guidance from them.
Thank you, Anne. Mia?
Thank you so much. Yeah, just echo what Anne said. I think, you know, you don't know what you don't know. So I think, you know, especially early in your career, this is knowing that there's a lot to still learn, and through the mentorship, you know, you gain so much. And also, you are the sum of the 5 people you spend the most amount of time with. So having your mentors or people that can inspire you and lift you up is, I think, really key. So I would just say, having humility or humbleness to know that I don't know everything right now, and I will kind of like have people around me that I can aspire to and kind of support me to kind of grow further. I think that's really key. And also, I think, you know, knowing that, you know, only that what limits us is ourselves often. So knowing that, you know, that is not always, but I mean, so really working on those limiting beliefs that we have as individuals about what we can achieve, really working on those and seeing them, and having self-awareness, I think, is so important. Having very clear goals about where you want to go, being self-aware as well, and you know, taking time to reflect on how am I potentially like blocking myself, and through fear, through insecurities, and really being aware of that. And I think having that self-reflection early on in your career with a very clear goal in mind of where you want to go. And sometimes we don't get to that goal, but we need a goal to get somewhere, and then maybe we'll go somewhere else, and that's totally fine. I think the one thing that I always say, or I always think is for my own personal self, is what did I wish that I knew when I was younger? And I think it's ultimately that you know, I need to, I'm the biggest block in achieving things, so I need to be aware of that and really work on that, and really surround myself with people who inspire me and support me to be better. And I think that's early in your career or any time in a person's career, I think to know that is a real
Absolutely. I think the mentorship piece is so important, to not be afraid to seek out mentorship, not be afraid to meet people, network, ask questions. It's all so valid and so important. And we're going to move into the Q&A now, but I did get something in the chat from Airtable, which is an interesting question, which is how, you know, if there are young women that want to move into leadership roles, more senior roles, but aren't sure where to begin. Besides mentorship and seeking advice, seeking insights, hearing other people's stories, you know, of how they've done it, is there anything else that you'd like to share on how they can, you know, move into those leadership roles?
Maybe I'll add, and I would say maybe a philosophical way of looking at it, but I think we're always leading. So in every action that we make, we're leading. So if the way we live our life, we're leading life. And I think the way to start actually having that really leadership role is here and now, in the way you act, the way you behave, like really stepping into it, because every moment we are leading. So I would say, you know, just think of, you know, every action you make has an impact. It influences people, it influences the people around you. So how do I step up and lead in the way that I need to now? And I think as you do that, you start to gain those qualities and attributes that allow you to be a leader. That's my personal opinion. Yeah.
For me, Senya, I would encourage anyone that's young in their career, that's looking to go into leadership roles, to actually, you know, sit down and look at your CV and make sure that you're not just ticking the boxes in terms of your qualifications, but we're talking about diversity and inclusion today, and gender inclusion, etc. But you also have to look at that in terms of your own CV. Make sure you have a diverse CV, not just in terms of your skill, but also in terms of other opportunities which come your way. For example, I sit on a business group in Scotland, the Chamber of Commerce, which is a voluntary role, but we contribute on a monthly basis to share information about the status of how business is going in my sector. And that is brilliant for me. I get to contribute, but I learn a lot from it. And also I'm interacting with other people at my stage. There are lots of different groups, business advisory groups or business groups that you can get involved in that can actually help you. I mean, I can't speak for somebody that's maybe in a large industry business, like yourselves or Boeing, etc. Because I'm a small company, but certainly there's no restrictions to voluntary contributions and diversifying that way. And I think once you open those doors, you learn a lot as you go along, and opportunities come your way that possibly might not strictly come your way just going through your singular organization. So being diverse in the way that you actually live your career as well as your life will help you if you're looking to go into forms of leadership roles.
I would just add that I think whether you're male or female, I hear a lot of young people say, I want to have a leadership role, but it takes time to get there, and it needs a lot of grit. I mean, we've all been there where we've, swept the floors and done all the basic stuff, that's data entry, and I think knowing that that's part of the journey to get there. So you can't jump too quick. Well, you can, but I think it's really good to have that sense of, okay, I'm going to step up, I'm going to learn, I'm going to do the steps, and when I'm in that leadership role, I really have done the process. I know, and I can really take that on. I think that's really important as a young person to know that and go through the process.
Definitely, Mia, and I'm seeing a couple of traits come through. So openness, curiosity, resilience, and really seeking out those opportunities, seeing where they take you, and joining communities, organizations. There's, in this virtual world, the one good thing is we're so global, and there's so many initiatives that you can get involved with. Mm-hmm. So absolutely, I stand behind that and hope that everybody does the same and kind of looks for those opportunities and tries something new. At least try. It won't hurt.
Yeah, exactly.
And then I should just one more question in the Q&A. Yes, if there are any women in aerospace or aviation communities you'd recommend women in the industry to join, or also business communities, whether that's Scotland, the UK, or more globally, or in Dubai. And do you want to answer that one?
I can go for that first. Yes, I know. Well, personally, I mean, the communities I'm involved in are based in Scotland, and the startup communities there. Also the life sciences industry. I'm a member of the life science industry. In aviation, my biggest community has actually been part of the Boeing Accelerator program, because when we came onto that program, we're also interacting a lot in aviation, but a lot of that is our customers that we're interacting with. And it wasn't until last year that we started interacting with other peer groups. So accelerator programs are fantastic for that. I mean, the 10 companies that were involved in our year group, then we've been interacting with them continually since we finished the program, and that's been fantastic for us, because those companies are not necessarily all at our stage. Some are younger, some are much more revenue generating or more established. And we've learned lots from each other on that way. So, if you're a leader of a young company out there, I would look at the right programs that are available. There's lots of networks that come off the back of those, and build them for yourselves. But don't be afraid to get out there and join any. I'm not involved in any specific aviation membership, but certainly the startup scene for aviation has really helped my company.
Thank you, Anne. And just to add on to that, I mean, obviously Anne is part of our Aerospace Xelerated portfolio. Aber is part of one of our portfolio companies. And we do run a couple of alumni-only events. But at Aerospace Xelerated, we also run events for the community. So I encourage everyone to sign up to our newsletter just to keep up to date with the kind of events that we do. We do invite-only events, we do public events, but really try to give back to the community beyond just the founders and the cohort that we have yearly. So keep an eye out on that. And Mia, what about you?
Yes.
Do you have any resources or communities to share?
Well, I would say, I don't know specifically aviation and aerospace. I would say, like maybe your program, Intellect is primarily a community. So we have the alumni, and they really connect and support each other, and we really try and foster that sense of collaboration among my alumni. So I think finding an accelerator and incubator that really supports you post-program with the community to help you grow and go through the challenges with you and really support each other. I think that's really key. So if you're looking for an incubator accelerator, maybe have a chat with the alumni and really get their feeling about what kind of community do they foster. And each kind of accelerator incubator has its different kind of culture. Intellect, we're very much focused on collaboration and community. So we really encourage our alumni to support each other, to work together. And really as simple as just having meetups every month, that physical, or having a WhatsApp group where people share opportunities, and then we have like resilience workshops, and so we have lots of activities that really help our alumni. But it just basically comes from encouraging the startups to work together. So I think if you're interested in a program, look at that as one of the kind of KPIs that you're seeking. I think also if you don't find a community, if you're interested in a women in aerospace community and there isn't one, start one. And I think that's a really great way for anyone that's really looking to build their networks to actually host a community. And that's such a great way of you meeting people and really connecting and learning and really. So I think if there isn't one, and I honestly cannot think of one right now, I would say just start one and just build that community, because that's really an incredible way of building your own skill sets and really finding like-minded people that you can collaborate with.
100% Mia, and I think that ties really well into the leadership piece. Start a community, be a leader. It's all linked together. So I love that. Thank you for sharing that. I think that we are coming to the end of our event today, but I just want to say thank you to Anne and Mia for joining our International Women's Day panel. Thank you for your insights, for sharing your journey so candidly, for giving your insights and input on what the future can look like if we take initiative and take action. So thank you so much.
Very welcome, Tanya. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a lovely day, both. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. And see you soon.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.